Hi and welcome to Art with Emily. Today we're focusing on our story feature for the week, and this is going to be a monthly story. So every month we will start a new story, and by the end of the month we will have 8 scenes to make up for that story. So every week we'll be doing 2 scenes, and what will happen is I will describe the story and both me and you will draw as we go through. The idea is that we all need to connect our auditory and our visual channels, and we all will create something different because we're not going to be drawing in parallel. There will be some showing along the way, so I'll show you what I've drawn, and you can always pause the video if you want to make some corrections or you just want to have a bit more time. That's completely fine. You do it at your pace. The materials that we'll need, I'm going to be doing it with a piece of paper. So I have an A3 piece of paper. This is a cartridge paper, but any paper will do. It'll be quite fun to do it quite big. So if you haven't got A3 and all you have is A4, I would use 2 pieces of A4 per week. Ideally at the end you can then bind them together with either hole punches and string, and that way we'll have a mini book which will be really fun and something you can treasure. And as always, try to remember to stay off your tablets or your iPads or anything digital. We're trying to really stay tactile and with using our hands and our eyes. I stopped halfway through. Paper and pen, ideally, not pencil. But if you want to use pencil, go for it, and you can always go over pen in your own time. Right, so let's get started on our story. Our story for this month is going to be called A Whale of a Time, because it's going to feature a whale called Dido. So just for some reference, we have a model of a whale here. Dido is a humpback whale. So Dido's body is really long and smooth. You can see that humpbacks have markings on their neck, so she'll have lines going all the way down her neck and speckles along her back. Dido also has barnacles all over her nose. And barnacles are little crustaceans and animals that stick to her nose and travel along with her on her adventures. So let's start by having a go at drawing Dido. So remembering all of those lovely features. So Dido has a really long body. She's really smooth. And her fin isn't quite completely smooth. Here we've got quite smooth, but we also have some little nodules along the way. So she is similar, so she has some bumps. So let's make her fin almost smooth, but not quite. And her tail has really big flippers on it, if that's what they're called. I don't think it is, but let's go with it. So she can move really quickly. So her tail here. And she has a little bump along her body. So she has a little ridge halfway along her body. So remember, she's got lines down her neck. So we need to put her lines in. And she needs to have a mouth because whales do. So let's have a mouth. And she's constantly, permanently looking pretty serene. So she looks pretty happy and just calm and placid. But she also is a bit different. She loves to swim with her eyes shut. So let's draw her eyes shut. She has a very inquisitive and curious personality. So she's a bit of an adventurer. So much so that at this point in time, Dido doesn't have any of her family and friends around her because she's sped off into the ocean by herself with her eyes closed. So she's not sure that her family and friends aren't there at the moment. So she likes to swim really fast. So we might have some lines showing that she's moving really fast through the water. So the only friends currently with her are those barnacles on her nose. So let's make sure we've got the barnacles on her nose. So barnacles are almost like little small, they're kind of circular. They can be any shape, but they're kind of crusty looking. So far, I've got Dido with her long markings down her neck, her barnacles on her nose. She's moving really fast, so she's got lots of movement showing. And I'm going to put on some speckles down her body like we have on the model here. So I just add on some, just by dotting with my pen, some speckles. So if you want to pause just to have a bit more time on Dido, that's fine, pause the video. What I'm going to draw to finalise our first scene is in the bottom right hand corner, unbeknown to Dido because she's got her eyes shut, there's a pile of rocks. These rocks are really uneven, so they're really lumpy, they're not square, and they're piled up on top of each other. So we know that there's 4 rocks piled on top of each other, so it's quite a high wall of rocks, and they're all random and jiggly, and so there's a big pile, and at the bottom of the pile there's some smaller rocks, almost like they've crumbled into the ground. So this is the end of my first scene. We have Dido swimming, speeding through the water, her tail flowing, the water rushing over her body, approaching a pile of rocks, but her eye is closed, so she doesn't know that it's there. So we're now moving on to scene 2. So in scene 2, the main focus of this scene isn't Dido's body. So we're going to have Dido really small in the bottom left-hand corner, just so that you're aware, so that we don't take up too much of the space. So Dido is in the corner of the scene. Her little head is poking out. And she abruptly bashes into a pile of rocks. So her nose is squished up against that big pile of rocks that she didn't know was there. Dido regularly bashes into rocks because as an adventurer, she loves to just swim through the water and take a few risks and feel like she's free. So this isn't unusual for her, but regardless, it causes her a lot of pain. So she's no longer serenely happy, she's actually a bit shocked. And her nose is pressed up to those rocks. So we need to redraw in the pile of rocks. And because she's bashed into the rocks, I'm just going to show that with some sparky lines, just to show that there's been a collision. As she raises her eyes, she looks ahead of her and she sees the trail of rocks start to break up a little bit. So there's still some rocks and they're still uneven, But in between the rocks, she starts to see speckles of gold. So little speckles of gold. And as she raises her gaze a little bit further, those speckles of gold turn into little chunks of gold. And these chunks eventually turn into a palace. So she raises her eyes and she can see that the palace has almost grown out of the rocks and it's all made of gold. The first thing that she sees of the palace is an archway. The archway almost looks like it's got an ice cream whippy cone at the top of it. So you know how cones kind of whip upwards. That's where her eyes are immediately drawn to. So far I've got her bashing her nose in the left-hand corner, the speckles of gold turning into the archway, which has almost like a whippy cone. Behind the archway, she sees 3 tall towers. They almost look like they reach the top of the ocean water. So, I need to draw 3 towers. The third one on the right-hand side isn't quite as tall as the other ones. And on the top of the towers look a little bit like hats. So directly behind the archway, the first tower we come to almost looks like it's got a shower cap on the top of it. The middle one looks like it's got a little pointy hat. And the third one looks like it's got a bit of a top hat. And because the towers are carved in, we can see lines running down the centre of them. So we see something like that. So we've got hats, we've got the columns with the lines down them. And on the far right hand side, there's one really, really tall, spindly tower. So really thin and really tall, taller than all the others. And it looks like it's got an arrow at the top of it. So all of these are made out of gold. But then Dido sees a slide wrapping its way around the left-hand column. And this looks a bit odd because the slide doesn't look like it's made out of gold. So it's definitely been put there by someone else. And the slide that wraps around the left-hand column looks like it then joins the entranceway. So it turns into the slide. So the slide comes round and comes into the entranceway. And because it's a slide, the inner section of it is darker than the outer bit. So in the middle we have a darker section because it's hollow. So you can just show that with some lines going across it. So that one almost disappears off the page. And then we have a second slide. And this slide wraps around the central column. So the column slide wraps its way around. Again, the slide is hollow in the middle. So we can show that with some darker lines to show that that's where people will slide down. And this one at the bottom turns into a brick wall. So the slide runs its way along the brick wall. And underneath the wall there's arches. So if you haven't finished drawing, pause it there, but this is what mine looks like at the moment. So we have the second slide wrapping its way round with the arches at the bottom. So Dido's looking at this wonderful, wonderful palace and thinking, who lives there? Who's made these slides? And what will I find if I explore further into this palace, this wonderful, wonderful place that I've never seen before? And I've never found something quite so exciting in one of my adventures. So, twitching her nose a little bit, she prepares to swim towards the palace. And that is the end of our second scene. And we will continue the story next week, where we'll find what Dido finds in the palace. So this is my current storyboard. If you want to paint it or colour it in, please do. It would be lovely to see what you create. So if you have drawn along with me, please share this with us on Instagram or Facebook with the hashtag ArcticOnline. Please come back next week so we can explore this adventure further together. And in order to see that, please do like and subscribe to the channel. So I look forward to continuing the adventure next week.